Hi friends, this is Ashley Latecki Ellenboss with Sky House Herb School and Apothecary. And today I have four subjects that I want to talk about. And I think they're connected. So I'm going to just sort of weave together a little bit of story, a little bit of plant wisdom, and a little bit of self-reflection. So today we'll be talking about memory, elephants, and Gotu Kola. And I want to start off by talking about something that Kat Mayer, who's a friend of mine, she's an herbalist with the Sacred Tradition School of Herbal Medicine. And in a talk that she did for Sky House this summer on herbs for depression, she talked about the importance of home. And she said that so many of us these days are kind of homeless, that we are wandering, looking for a place to feel rooted, a place to feel home, and that a lot of our sickness is homesickness. And, it's not the first time I've heard this concept, but I feel like kind of now more than ever, um, so many of us are seeking a stable home because the outside world is proving to not be a very stable, reliable place. And not that it ever was. I mean, according to the yoga philosophy that I study in Bhakti Yoga, I mean, the world is impermanent and it's full of suffering and it's material, and we are at our essence immaterial, living in a material world. And so if we're trying to seek happiness from the material world, we're bound to be disappointed. That we should really be seeking happiness in the spiritual world, which is really where that's our home. Our home is in the spiritual world. And I've been reflecting on home a lot as a concept, and this play between the external and the internal, as I recently have moved home to Minnesota, which is the state where I was born. I lived here until I was about 5, and then my family moved. But I have tons of relatives that still live in the area. And my husband, he also grew up and lived in this area until he was about 20. So there's something about home for both of us, this feeling of coming home. Um, and yet at the same time, there's something so deeply, I think, physical that is impacting me about being home. But there's also something that I feel like in being home is also allowing me to open to um, more of myself, if that makes sense. And I remember my friend Sanjeevani, she's an incredible Ayurvedic practitioner based out of Canada. She spent a lot of time working in Peru with the mamas, who are 10 native indigenous women from the Andes mountain regions, who all have come together trying to spread the message of how do we help our planet Earth, and how do we help one another survive in these times. And she's been working and living, she lived with them, I think, for about 5 years, but has been really studying their work. And I remember she called me about, gosh, I guess it was about 6 years ago. She called me and she said, "Hey, Ashley, I've moved home." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, I moved home to Canada. And she had been living in Costa Rica before that, in this, beautiful beach house. And, before that had been traveling all over the world, New Zealand. And she said, "No, I'm back in Canada." She said, after studying with the mamas, they just said that it is really important that people start going back home now. And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, the place where you were born and the imprint that your life had on the place of your birth, and the impact of your placement against the backdrop of the sky and the stars and the planets and the universe it is all celestially divine and aligned." And she said, a lot of people in the ancient world didn't leave their home. They stayed in their home space. They might travel out when they were younger and get life experience, but they would always return home and bring it back to the well of their community. And she said, the mamas told me that that I need to go home and work the land of my ancestors and bring something back to the community and the people that brought me up. And so she did that. She moved to a very, very, very small town in Northeast Canada, and has been doing her work there. And when my husband and I were thinking about where we wanted to move to raise our family, and we thought about where we wanted to go, we both kept thinking Minnesota because it's a home, it's a rooted place for us. And so being here, I've only been here for I guess about a month now, but there's something about being here. I drove in my grandmother's neighborhood yesterday, and all these familiar places and all these memories started flooding back. And I just felt like, yes, I need to access the eyes that I had as a child. And the only way I can do that is to see the things that I saw in my childhood and to give myself time and space to re-experience them and to try to learn from them. And it was just very, very profound. Um, the other thing that I was thinking about while I was washing dishes, you never know when these thoughts, sort of insights come in, but I was washing the dishes and I was thinking about how, as an herbal teacher, I revisit the same herbal concepts in the solar or the calendar year again and again each year. So I teach my class on the nervous system at the same place in the program every year. I teach, a class on herbs for the cardiovascular system. I teach or a class on energetics. And every time I come back, I redo my slides and I read through, my last presentation, but I get to revisit it. And I was thinking about how that's like circumambulation. And in a lot of holy places in the world, there is this desire to circle around things. So, a mosque or a holy site, you walk around it to just reflect and gather the energy. It's a very yin practice, this circling around, like the moon circles around the sun. And um, and I was thinking, also the mala beads that we have on a string that we use in my tradition are all strung together, and they represent the number 108 is specific to the moon. And how so many of us, I feel like right now, we're trying to circle back to something. And the circumambulation, or sort of continuing to go around old familiar patterns and things, is actually really important. That there's no bypassing the time. And this is something that the planet Saturn really teaches us, and it's been so activated in my chart. I've just been really learning how it just takes time and repetition to really learn things. And so, as a teacher, every year I have to dive back into my studies of all of these different parts of my practice. And every year I gain more. But I can't, like, I know that next year it's going to all of the thoughts that I thought were so complete and advanced. Well, you know what I mean? Like you think you have some things figured out, but then you're going to go back around it, and it's going to get better, and it's going to get more refined and more connected. And so that process is something that that we just have to commit to for a long period of time. And I know a lot of my students get frustrated, like, why do we keep coming back to chamomile? I'm like, yeah, because we have to come back to this plant over and over again, because we're circumambulating it. We're walking around it, getting to know it from all these different angles, from different places in time. You in the spring of last year are different from you in the fall right now. So we have to walk around it again and again to get to know these plants. And then I was thinking, as I was teaching my class today on nervines and the nervous system and the brain and memory, I just kept thinking about the ways that we can support the neurological synapses and the neurons and the myelin sheaths that surround the axons of all of our nerves. And and the ways that nature kind of shows us how to do this. And kind of like all the images from my childhood started coming back as I saw the places I used to play at my grandmother's house as a child. In a similar way, as we look around the natural world and start to study the plants and hear their stories, it's like we get to tap into, I think, this information that is, it's like so deep inside of us. It's like locked in these old vaults that our ancestors would like be able to unlock and pull that book out and open it and spend hours just soaking it in. Um, in the modern world, we get these, as we study the plants, we get these glimpses, and especially when we're outside with them or in nature with them, it's like we get these insights as to how they evolved and how they've been partnering with our species for so long. So one plant that really stands out that I was researching again and coming back to again this year is Gotu Kola. And the story of Gotu Kola that really made me fall in love with this plant was the story of the yogis in their monasteries up in the mountains, in the Himalaya mountains of India and Asia. They would watch these elephants eat and just chow down on these really green succulent leaves of Gotu Kola. And this, Gotu Kola is it's a kind of round, lobed, leafed plant. It's kind of succulent. It grows like a kind of a carpet across the ground, and it really loves moist, damp places. And so, the yogis would observe the elephants munching on this plant, and they knew that elephants were well known for their memory, their and they're very enlightened. They're very wise, intelligent creatures that are very, very revered in Hindu culture. And so, they had a reverence for the animal already. And when they saw the animal just loving it just enjoying itself as it chewed this Gotu Kola plant, they said there must be something about this plant and elephants that is conjoined. And it also looks, the leaves kind of look like an elephant's ear. But so they took note of that, and they started harvesting the Gotu Kola and making medicines and using it as both a food and medicine. And they noticed that it also had qualities that sharpened their mind, increased their cognition, and allowed them to think and meditate more with better success. And so, in really many ways, the elephants showed the yogis this plant. They introduced the yogis to it. But the yogis were aware enough to watch and see the pattern and to find interest in it in order to bring it into their own lives. And so for thousands of years in Ayurveda, they've used Gotu Kola, and Gotu Kola is spelled Gotukola. It is also, the Latin name is Centella asiatica, and sometimes called pennywort, or I think, yeah, pennywort is one of its common names. It's also called Brahmi in Ayurvedic medicine because of its sort of Brahminical qualities, which means that which connects us to God, or that which brings us into higher states of consciousness. And so it was used as a Rasayana herb, and Rasayana means an herb that promotes longevity and concentration, and is anti-aging. So they considered it to be a Rasayana herb because it had all of these properties, cognition enhancing as well. And so, it enjoyed a very long and continues to enjoy a lot of use in Ayurvedic medicine. And in Chinese medicine, it is used as well. There's other species that are related, and it has made its way to the United States and is now a very popular herb among Western herbalists. So I wanted to just tell you that story, and I feel like there is a connection there between, the other thing about home with elephants is that elephants walk the same pathway throughout the jungle or savanna, wherever they live, and they have a very clear migratory path. And wherever their ancestors have died, they will stop and get on their knees and wail. And they'll have this sort of like wailing, crying session as a mourning, a grief over the bones of their ancestors. And so every year they come back. And that just really struck me too, because, in some ways, like, there are a lot of skeletons here in this home, but I want to revisit them. There's something about revisiting the past, and there's something right now I think about coming back to old spaces that something that it triggers something very animal and human and healing in us, and we need to let that grief out, whether the grief is the same grief, or in many cases when we revisit it, the grief also kind of takes on a new kind of a new flavor each time we revisit some of these old places of injury, or these old places of loss. And so, the elephant medicine just feels like such a good one to have in our lives right now. So how do you use Gotu Kola? Gotu Kola is ideally taken as a fresh herb. So I've grown it before. I lived in a very small apartment outside of Baltimore with, it was like a one-bedroom apartment, and I just had a lot of windows. And so I would grow it on top of the radiators in pots, and it would just spread over. It loved it. It likes sort of warm, but it needs to stay moist, warm, moist spaces. So if you grow it fresh, the best thing to do is to juice it. And you can take 10 to 30 milliliters of the juice, like once or twice a day. That's kind of the more classic Ayurvedic use. But you can also take it as a powder. You can use maybe 3 to 5 grams, 2 to 3 times a day. So 5 grams is about a teaspoon. So you can take a teaspoon a few times a day of the dried herb. You can also use a tincture. Tinctures can work nicely, but ideally from the fresh plant. And so tincture would be somewhere between maybe 6 and 10 milliliters a day. So maybe you would do like 2 droppers full in the morning, the afternoon, and evening. So we can think about this as being a neurogenic herb. So it's regenerating to the nervous system and the nerves. It's really good if you've been exhausted or depleted, run down, if you feel like you need some nervous system support. It's really good for helping build concentration and memory. And I remember when I was in herb school, we were assigned to take one plant for 2 weeks and journal about it. And I chose Gotu Kola because I just learned about the yogic connection that it had. And I remember I was doing a regular daily yoga sadhana, and I remember just thinking, oh my gosh, my practice is getting so much better. Like my meditations were getting deeper and deeper and deeper while I was taking the Gotu Kola. So I ended up taking it for almost 2 months straight. And it was a very profound experience. So I strongly recommend it if you're looking to enhance your spiritual capacities, your meditation, the quality of your meditation, the quality of your prayers, the quality of your inner deep work, whatever it is you might be doing. And also, yeah, I think just as an herb that is enhances memory, and yeah, can help us kind of dig into some of those spaces that we might be ready now to revisit. So I hope that's interesting to you and helpful. Again, today was just a little bit of more of a weaving array of stories and sharings. So let me know if you have any questions, if you've used Gotu Kola, you've had any experiences with the plant yourself, and yeah, what other things that you use for memory or for circling back to things, or herbs that might connect you to your space of your inner and your outer home. I'd love to hear from you guys. Thanks so much for watching. Have a good day. Bye-bye.